perpetuate being a teenager.
And he was getting older. He turned 40 years old. That bothered him tremendously.
He would never let anybody ever see him gray-headed, so he always, always dyed his hair. In '75, he decided to have a cosmetic surgery done on his face.
He was afraid of getting old. Here's a guy who was a sex symbol, you know? And when you start getting long in the tooth, it's difficult. It is not a pleasant sight.
Impuissante, sa compagne Linda le regarde sombrer.
There were times when he felt intensely lonely at heart. That's the way he put it.
La solitude lui pèse.
He was really lonely, and I think that was part of his demise. And so he hung out in his room, got high on the sleeping pills, and ate a lot.
Mais il va payer ses mauvaises habitudes. Le 29 janvier 1975, quelques jours après son 40e anniversaire, Elvis a besoin d'une nouvelle cure de désintoxication et reprend le chemin du Baptist Memorial Hospital de Memphis. Le prestigieux malade a droit à un traitement de faveur.
I made his bed. I put all of his linen in the pillowcase. I took it myself and put it down the laundry chute. A lot of times have his name, some of his lab work put under a different name. Anything that has Elvis Presley's name on it, I can assure you somebody's going to take it.
He made Linda Thompson stay up there with him all the time, 24 hours a day. And they put another bed in for her right alongside of his. I mean, he wouldn't even let her put her clothes on. She had to wear a nightgown.
I was not impaired in any way, and yet there I was hospitalized for weeks at a time because he really needed me to be with him.
Mais dès sa sortie de l'hôpital, la toxicomanie le rattrape. Les efforts conjugués de Linda et du personnel de l'hôpital n'ont pas l'effet escompté.
No matter how many times you detoxed him, didn't do no good. As soon as he went home, he went in the stash.
Elvis n'est plus que l'ombre de lui-même.
He became very slovenly. He never dressed correctly. He thought if he took this pill that it would eliminate body odors and stuff like that. And believe you me, it didn't. He put on Brute to hide everything, and you could just smell him coming.
Il se détache de la réalité et perd tout intérêt pour le sexe.
Sex becomes almost secondary because the drug is more interesting. Most great addicts are not really prone to sex.
Néanmoins, le King n'a pas perdu tout son charisme. Ses fans font la queue des heures pour assister à l'un de ses spectacles à l'Hôtel Hilton durant l'été 1975. Mais certains d'entre eux repartiront déçus, comme en témoigne le responsable des relations publiques de l'hôtel.
The few times that Elvis became ill or had to cancel performances, we would just post signs and make public announcements. That's all you can do. I do remember one time that Elvis didn't particularly want to do the second show.
He wasn't feeling good. And Colonel said, there's people already seated for that second show. I'm not going to go down there and tell them. He said, you do that second show, and then I can take care of it. You go get on that plane tonight, and you go back to Memphis. You don't go home, you go to the hospital, directly to the hospital.
Le 21 août 1975, Elvis est de retour au Baptist Memorial Hospital pour une énième cure de désintoxication.
He had to help himself to start with, and we could only say, look, why don't you do this, or why don't you try to help yourself? If you pushed him, you were out, and then you can't help him, you know? You can only hope that he'll get better.
Pendant quelque temps, Elvis se prend en main. Le soir de la Saint-Sylvestre, il donne le plus grand concert de toute sa carrière au Silverdome de Pontiac, dans le Michigan. Le King se déchaîne devant la foule en délire quand se produit un incident gênant.
Elvis was on stage and went down into one of his karate moves and just ripped the whole back of his pants out and had to leave the stage.
Elvis enfile un autre costume et finit le spectacle. De retour à Graceland, il demande à sa gouvernante de réparer la combinaison fétiche.
He stood up on the steps right there in the den. He said, I'm gonna stretch my legs out and see if they gonna bust. Them pants busted open. I said, see that, Mr. Evans? I told you, I said, good, you went on stage.
Le King n'entre plus dans sa combinaison, mais c'est le cadet de ses soucis. Ses gardes du corps, Red West, Dave Ebler et Sonny West, tombent en disgrâce.
Elvis rather unceremoniously fired Sonny and Red West after many, many years of servitude.
À l'automne 1976, une nouvelle épreuve attend Elvis. Linda Thompson, celle qui partage sa vie depuis 4 ans, décide de le quitter. La jeune femme est à bout.
I left and I knew I probably wouldn't see him again alive. It was very difficult to leave because I had to make a decision. I either stay and age very quickly, or I die of stress, or he dies anyway, and I'm here to witness it. You know, I can't keep him alive forever. I can't do this forever. So I had to leave him knowing that probably nobody would be foolish enough, really, to care for him the way that I had, and that he would probably end up dying in a short period of time.
Linda Thompson ne s'est pas trompée.
Had he married her, or kept her with him and not been looking for someone else, it would have been, he probably would still be alive.
Elvis se met immédiatement à la recherche d'une autre compagne. Il la trouve en décembre 1976. C'est un ancien prix de beauté, une fille de 20 ans nommée Ginger Alden.
He wanted a trophy. She couldn't be a mother figure to him. She wasn't on the same mental or intellectual level. She wasn't as experienced. She was a trophy.
Elvis séduit Ginger pendant une série de concerts à Las Vegas. Leur idylle annonce malheureusement le début de la fin.
He was sick in body, he was sick in soul. He was with a girl who couldn't help him or understand him. He was on a downhill spiral with nobody around to help him, nobody to point the way.
Lamar Fike s'inquiète de voir la santé d'Elvis décliner. Il essaie de le convaincre d'annuler la tournée.
I said, let's not do this tour. You know, there were no Betty Ford clinics to help an individual, especially stars. And I said, let's just shut this sucker down. Let's go to Hawaii, take a year off, you know, pick coconuts, wander around the beach. He said, you know what, I think we'll do it after this tour.
Elvis est sûr qu'il peut encore déchaîner les foules. Mais pour ce faire, il a besoin de plus de drogue que jamais.
It became heavier, you know, heavier drugs and more of it. So after all that time, it finally took its toll on him. But it was a progressive thing.
Drogué pour pouvoir monter en scène, le roi du rock'n'roll n'est plus aux yeux de ses fans qu'un bouffon.
He didn't give a damn. He'd forget words to songs. He'd sometimes be so out of it that he'd introduce the Stamps Quartet or the Sweet Inspirations or the band and let them play, and he'd walk off the stage.
Joe Guercio est découragé.
When I'm ready to do one of the tunes, I go to raise my hands, and his group goes into another tune. It was chaos.
He'd start talking to the audience instead of singing and ramble and ramble and ramble. And then he'd start trying to sing a song, and he'd forget the words. He was so messed up, he didn't really care.
His female fans seemed absolutely not to notice. Even when he was lying down on stage and singing a song on his back, when he was making up lyrics, his fans didn't seem to care.
Jerry Weintraub explique ce phénomène.
His audience accepted him, and that when they saw him on the stage and they saw him at 300 pounds, they saw the Elvis from 20 years before. They couldn't see it. They still ran to the stage. They still threw their panties on a stage. They still threw their brassieres on a stage. They still wanted to kiss him. They still wanted to hold him. They still wanted to make love to him. Because he was Elvis Presley, and that's what they remembered him that way.
One of the great tragedies of Elvis's life was the fans accepted him any way they could get him. I mean, if those fans said, we don't like you fat, we're walking out, he'd have shaped up.
Le 12 décembre 1976, Elvis Presley achève sa tournée à Las Vegas par un spectacle terne, le dernier qu'il fera dans la ville qui l'a rendu célèbre.
Nobody before, nobody since Elvis did what he did. I mean, you're talking, we did 2 and 3 shows a day for 4 weeks. Now that's a lot of shows, especially with the intensity of Elvis' shows. I mean, it literally killed him.
Elvis fait découvrir Graceland à sa nouvelle compagne, Ginger Alden. Il reprend son rythme d'antan, dormant le jour et faisant la fête la nuit. Le 26 janvier 1977, à en croire Ginger, il la demande en mariage. La jeune femme accepte, bien qu'elle ait des doutes sur leur avenir commun.
We were in Elvis's room, and he said, you know, if anything ever happens to me, I want you and Lisa to take people on the tour of his trophy room. And I said, don't talk like that.
La nouvelle fiancée d'Elvis ne fait pas grand-chose pour remédier à son état de santé. Il est de plus en plus faible et souffrant. Loin de compatir, le colonel Parker annonce une autre tournée pour bientôt. Lamar Fike s'interpose hors de lui.
And I told the guys, I said, this guy will never see the snow fly. I said, he's in bad shape. And I told Colonel that. I said, this guy's dying on you, don't you understand?
En bon petit soldat, Elvis se range aux arguments du colonel. Mais la nouvelle tournée n'est pas entamée depuis un mois qu'il s'effondre d'épuisement à Baton Rouge, en Louisiane. Il est immédiatement transporté à Memphis pour être hospitalisé une fois de plus au Baptist Memorial Hospital. Pendant son séjour, Elvis Presley découvre l'introspection. Il a de longues discussions avec son infirmière.
He said, but are they going to remember me? Will people remember me when I'm gone? And I said, I don't think there's any question of that.
Le 5 avril 1977, au beau milieu de la nuit, Elvis Presley quitte l'hôpital en pyjama et retourne à Graceland. Pâle, bouffi et épuisé, il vit quasiment reclus.
They would put aluminum foil, the younger guys would do all this. Would put aluminum foil on the windows, set TV guides on the nightstand, bottled water, ice water, everything that he basically needed. It was cold. He could put dead bodies in his room. He liked it that way because the pills made you hot. Especially if you were on uppers, you sweat like a pig.
Ginger Alden reste à ses côtés, mais elle est souvent dépassée par la situation.
I've seen him fall asleep in an upright position.
He couldn't eat any solid foods because when you're Class A narcotics, you like nothing but sweet things. He would eat 8 to 10 honeydew melons in the morning trying to get sugar, and he would eat a pile of popsicles because it's all they could handle on his stomach.
La dépendance aux médicaments et la boulimie mettent son corps à rude épreuve.
He started to look really bad. He blew up like a balloon. He was hugely fat.
Ses régimes d'amaigrissement intensif échouent et sa conception du sport est très personnelle.
Well, Elvis played racquetball as you had to hit the ball to him so he didn't have to move 3 inches. That was a workout to him. He didn't chase it. As far as I'm concerned, the ball was subservient and had to come to him. Damn if he was going to go to it.
Les performances sexuelles du King sont à l'image de ses résultats sur un court de squash.
And Elvis would say that to the girl. You see, I'm getting ready to go on tour and I can't waste my precious bodily fluid, so let's just lie here and talk or just play around and not do nothing.
Le 1er juin 1977, le colonel Parker surprend tout le monde en annonçant qu'il veut tirer une émission télévisée des meilleurs moments de la prochaine tournée d'Elvis, prévue 2 semaines plus tard. Le 19 juin, le tournage commence à Omaha, au Nebraska. Elvis s'avance sous les projecteurs.
Elvis always had trouble seeing with the stage lights, and I actually feared that he might fall off the stage.
Son entourage s'inquiète.
Elvis was tired during that tour. He was overweight.
À l'écran, Elvis Presley fait peine à voir.
I saw it and I cried. I had tears in my eyes and I was mad. Madder than hell that Vernon and Colonel Parker would allow CBS to show that.
Le 26 juin 1977, pour les 68 ans du colonel Parker, Elvis et son équipe regagnent Indianapolis tant bien que mal. À la surprise générale, il y donne l'un de ses spectacles les plus inspirés et les plus dynamiques.
After his last song, he brought his father up on stage and introduced him to the crowd. He almost never did that. It was like he was saying goodbye.
Au milieu des années 60, Elvis Presley, dit le King, est détrôné par la déferlante Beatles. Commence alors pour lui une longue descente aux enfers. Elvis épouse le 1er mai 1967 Priscilla Beaulieu, qui lui donne une fille, Liza Mary, 9 mois plus tard. Mais ce bonheur n'est qu'une accalmie passagère. En 1970, À 35 ans, Elvis consomme une énorme quantité de médicaments et son comportement s'en ressent. La pression du succès est de plus en plus forte. En 1972, il donne un show retransmis en direct par satellite aux télévisions du monde entier. Mais en coulisses, le King est à bout. Drogué et boulimique, il fait un premier séjour à l'hôpital de Memphis en 1973. Au début de l'été 1977, Elvis est bouffi. Il est de plus en plus dépendant des médicaments. Son moral est au plus bas. Lorsque sa tournée est bouclée à Indianapolis, il se retire une fois de plus derrière les grilles de Graceland, son royaume devenu sanctuaire.
He withdrew into a world of prescription drugs. Elvis said, at one point, he said, I'd rather feel nothing than feel the pain I'm feeling.
À la fin du mois de juin, Elvis se noie dans les drogues diverses. Il abuse des barbituriques, des amphétamines, des psychotropes, de tout ce qu'il peut se procurer sur ordonnance.
He got to a point where he was taking Dilaudid, which is, one of the strongest cancer patient, almost terminal patients. That's what they're prescribed. He didn't have cancer, but that's what gave him a buzz.
Dilaudid is really a synthetic heroin. And I mean, when you take a load of it, you're screwed up.
He would take some medication for sleeping, get groggy, and he would get some Ritalin or something, which calms down children that are hyper, but it lifts adults up.
Elvis est en permanence sous les effets de la drogue. Même prendre une douche devient un challenge. On doit lui installer une chaise.
He just sit there, especially if he was screwed up and he couldn't stand up.
Elvis a un moyen infaillible pour se procurer les drogues qu'il veut. Il consulte un dictionnaire médical.
He knew a PDR better than a doctor did. So, if he wanted a certain caliber of dope or of pills, he would find out what particular ache would get you this. And he would say, I've got this ache. Well, the doctor normally would prescribe what it says under that ache. And it's what Elvis wanted to get, And his PDR was updated every month.
Ce n'est plus le King qui fait vivre la Memphis Mafia, mais la Memphis Mafia qui se bat pour le maintenir en vie.
You know somebody's hooked and you can't tell them, because they think they know what's best for them.
We took some pills and emptied them out, and Elvis took them. But he knew immediately because he could taste the sugar in them.
Le médecin attitré d'Elvis, George Nikopoulos, essaie lui aussi de sevrer son patient à son insu.
I personally sat and watched Dr. Nick take a vial of Placidyls, which were very strong sleeping pills that Elvis required. And he took a very small gauge hypodermic needle and he would extract half or more of the fluid that was inside those Placidyls and fill them back up with saline. He was reducing the strength of those pills, I think in an effort to wean Elvis off of those.
The one and only doctor that really tried to control the situation and cared about Elvis was Dr. Nick.
En vain, Elvis est bel et bien accro.
He was his own worst enemy. There's no other way to say it. He didn't want to quit. Had he wanted to quit, he would have whipped it.
We're not dealing with a normal human being that might say, okay, well then I guess I have a problem and let's go check into the Betty Ford Clinic. Hello, there was no Betty Ford Clinic and there was nobody to exert that kind of pressure on Elvis.
The only two people who could legally commit Elvis and keep him in an institution for treatment was Vernon, his father, and Priscilla when she was married to him. Neither one of them would do that.
Pendant qu'il coiffe Elvis, Larry Geller tente une autre approche pour le sortir de l'enfer de la drogue, la spiritualité.
I told Elvis about various spiritual books that I read that I felt he would love to, read himself. Elvis began reading voraciously every day of his life. He kept saying, I want the great experience that I read about in these books, the God experience.
Elvis est plus obsédé que jamais par la spiritualité et la métaphysique.
He started giving sermons and talks about, and most times it's the same thing, over and over and over again. It was a funny thing because when he started doing that, you could see, one by one, all the old guys walk out of the room because we got tired of it.
La Memphis Mafia en a également assez d'amuser le King. Mais lui veut continuer à prendre du bon temps. Le 7 août 1977, dans une dernière tentative de revivre sa jeunesse, Elvis loue le parc d'attractions de Libertyland pour 14 000 $. Il veut faire partager à sa fille, Lisa Mary, sa passion pour les montagnes russes.
That was the first time Elvis had ever taken Lisa at night to Libertyland.
And he would go out there after hours, you know, and his favorite rides, one of them was a roller coaster and the other one was what they call the Dodgem cars, which is, you know, bumper cars.
Elvis liked to ride what was called the Pippin, which is a roller coaster at the fairgrounds. And sometimes he just ride it continuously, 20 times, over and over and over again.
We were doing some of the things that we used to do. It was a whole lot like Elvis was trying to relive some of the past in a way. It was sad.
De leur côté, les anciens gardes du corps d'Elvis, Dave Abler, Red West et son cousin Sonny, ne lui ont toujours pas pardonné leur renvoi un an plus tôt. Elvis prétend qu'il s'agit d'un malentendu et en rejette la faute sur son père.
He told his father to give them $5,000 each, severance, and tell them that they would be hired back in about a month or two. What Vernon did, instead of doing what Elvis asked, he gave him 1 week's pay and didn't say a word about hiring him back. The excuse he gave was, we have to cut down on our expenses.
Sans travail et sans ressources, Sonny, Dave et Red s'apprêtent à publier leur mémoire.
We wrote the book, Elvis, What Happened, to show him what he was doing, what he was becoming, how he wasn't himself anymore. He was doing things to hurt people. He was doing things to hurt people's feelings because he wasn't the same guy because of what he was taking.
Quand Elvis reçoit la première épreuve, il devient blême. Sonny, Red et Dave ont enfreint les règles de la Memphis Mafia. Ils tentent d'acheter leur silence.
We were offered money by a representative of Elvis's not to do the book.
Mais les anciens gardes du corps décident de publier leur livre coûte que coûte. Elvis tente une dernière fois de les arrêter.
Just prior to the publishing of the book, he made a phone call to Red, and he was out of it when he was talking to Red. He was trying to make excuses, and Red point blank told him, he said, Elvis, I'm worried about you. And Elvis slurring his words and everything because he had too many pills in him.
Elvis sait que seule la vérité blesse. Il ne veut pas qu'on révèle ses secrets.
You know, the publication of the book didn't wreck him that bad. I tell you what wrecked him. Somebody found out what he did.
Elvis was worried about what the fans would think. He didn't want their pity. He didn't want them saying, God bless you, Elvis, everyone has problems. Elvis did not want to be considered in that position. He was above everyone.
He was devastated. His stepbrother, David Stanley, said it was like watching the wing of a 747 come off. When Elvis saw this book, it was the end.
Lundi 15 août 1977, une chaleur accablante s'abat sur Memphis dans le Tennessee. Comme à son habitude, Elvis passe toute la matinée et une partie de l'après-midi à dormir tranquillement.
He had a huge bed in there. It was like 9 by 9. And then to the right was a bathroom. So he had everything he wanted up there. And he can cocoon himself if he wanted to.
Vers 16 h, Elvis se lève et prend son petit déjeuner. Il entame une nouvelle tournée dans 2 jours et surveille donc de près son alimentation, du moins le croit-il.
Wanted to lose weight, it was like, hey, Jell-O sounds good, or grapefruit sounds good. So he'd eat a ton of grapefruits and 300 pounds of Jell-O, and he thought that would lose weight, and it didn't. He couldn't understand why.
Un peu plus tard dans l'après-midi, Elvis joue avec Lisa Mary. C'est un papa gâteau, prêt à tout pour faire plaisir à sa fille de 9 ans. Ce jour-là, il essaie sans succès de lui procurer une copie privée d'un tout nouveau film, La Guerre des Étoiles.
Elvis's only child was very important to Elvis. He lavished things on her. Toward the end of his life, he was extremely worried about what she was going to think about him when she found out some of the things that he'd been involved in.
À 19 h, son cousin Billy Smith passe dire bonjour. Il s'assoit avec le père et la fille devant la télévision.
I spent a lot of time just not doing anything, just being with him whenever he wanted it.
Vers 21 h 30, Elvis envoie l'enfant au lit et va l'aborder. C'est la dernière fois que Lisa Mary verra son père vivant.
I don't think Lisa Marie was very much aware of the weirdness in Elvis Presley's world. I don't think she was very much aware of her father's drug use, for example. He lived in a world that was upside down by definition.
Personne ne s'inquiète en voyant Elvis et sa compagne Ginger partir chez le dentiste pour un rendez-vous à 23 h. C'est une habitude.
The dentist gave him a painkiller, codeine with Imprint. There were some witnesses who had seen him have bad reactions from codeine-type substances.
I never saw him have a reaction to it, and he took a lot of it. We didn't bother to say Imprint codeine, we just said EC, so strangers wouldn't know what we were talking about.
Le couple s'arrête à la pharmacie pour acheter les médicaments. Ils sont de retour à Graceland vers minuit 30. Elvis et Ginger ont alors une grande conversation.
Elvis went into more detail about our wedding than he had ever before. And we talked for quite a while, and he was talking about announcing the engagement when he performed here in Memphis.
Elvis said to me he had absolutely no intentions of ever marrying into that family. There was another girl that was going to join Elvis on that tour.
La gouvernante entend le couple se disputer à l'étage.
They had some misunderstanding about her going with him on the tour. She must have run out of the room. And he said, if you don't go tonight, you not going at all. He said, because somebody else will be out there in your place. And I said, oh my God, I said, sound like they into it.
He was very upset about his relationship with Ginger Alden and the fight that they had had that night.
2 heures plus tard, Elvis donne l'ordre à Sam Thompson de ramener Lisa Mary chez sa mère à Los Angeles dès le lendemain.
We talked on the phone about the show and what I would do, and I was to fly commercial, as I recall, with Lisa, and I was slated to leave the next morning. And we always flew under an assumed name because I always carried a weapon because Lisa was Elvis's daughter, and we were always concerned about kidnapping.
Elvis discute également des préparatifs de la tournée avec Dick Grob.
He wanted to know about whether arrangements had been made for this other lady to accompany him on the tour. And then we just sat around and talked. You know, it was like Elvis didn't want me to leave because he didn't want to be alone with Ginger.
Elvis contacte ensuite le docteur George Nikopoulos pour faire le plein de médicaments avant son départ en tournée.
He called Dr. Nick and asked that Dr. Nick write him a prescription for Dilaudid, a real heavy-duty downer synthetic heroin. The prescription was called in to the pharmacy at Baptist Hospital, which stayed open all night, one of the few that did back in those days. And one of Elvis's stepbrothers went and picked it up.
Elvis prend le médicament, mais celui-ci tarde à agir. Vers 4 heures du matin, il demande à Ginger, Billy Smith et sa femme, de faire une partie de squash avec lui.
We all went downstairs, played racquetball, and Elvis seemed to be, in really a good mood. And we played till it must have been close to 6, the sun was coming up.
La partie terminée, Elvis ne ressent toujours aucune fatigue. Il fait un peu de vélo d'appartement, puis il joue quelques chansons au piano, situé juste à côté de la salle de squash.
Billy Smith told me later on that one of the two songs was Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, and I believe he said the other was Unchained Melody. Those were the two last songs that Elvis ever sang on this earth.
Elvis se sent enfin prêt à dormir.
I asked him when he come in the house from the racket club, I said, Mr. Elvis, I said, would you like to have breakfast? And he said, no, I just want some water, some cold water. I said, well, I'll bring you some water upstairs. So he went on upstairs. And he looked it good. Didn't look like a thing was wrong with him.
Vers 7 heures du matin, Billy lave les cheveux d'Elvis en écoutant patiemment ses jérémiades.
Billy was probably the closest person to Elvis in the last year and a half of his life. Billy was with him 24 hours a day.
Vers 7h30, Billy rentre grappiller quelques heures de sommeil. Le demi-frère d'Elvis, Rick Stanley, monte le voir dans sa chambre.
I remember Elvis saying he couldn't really sleep very well. And I remember Ricky Stanley brought up some medication for Elvis to take at that time.
As the members of his entourage later revealed, he had a battery of drugs. that were classified as Attack 1, Attack 2, Attack 3.
Vers 8h30, la tante Delta lui apporte un verre d'eau, le journal du matin et un 3e sachet de médicaments.
Always before a tour, Elvis was so keyed up, he just couldn't sleep. He took Quaaludes different times, some, a form of tranquilizer, Placidils.
After you take those things for so long, the sleeping pill only lasts maybe 2-3 hours. You get up, or you wake up, you think you're awake, and you think, oh, I can't go back to sleep again. Give me another one.
I fell back asleep, and then I remember Elvis was getting up, and I said, what's the matter? And he said he was going to go in the bathroom and read. And the last thing I said to him, I said, don't fall asleep. And he said, oh, I won't. And he walked into the bathroom. And that's the last time I saw Elvis.
Bathroom, there was a smaller TV and a barber's chair. Sometimes he'd just sit in there and read in the barber chair.
Elvis a d'autres raisons d'aller à la salle de bain.
Bodily functions are really a horrible subject, but it's you just can't do what he did and be normal in any restriction.
He had almost a total blockage of his lower digestive tract. His large intestine was impacted. His colon was impacted. It was a sure sign of drug abuse. The downers that he had taken over many, many months had almost completely shut down his digestive tract.
Tandis qu'Elvis lit dans la salle de bain ce mardi 16 août, quelque chose de terrible se produit.
I believe he had a cardiac standstill. That would be a painful event. That'd be like a heart attack. You'd feel that in your chest. You're reading the book, you stand up, you're not able to walk or take steps because of the clothing around your ankles. Throw this book, take a step or two, and fall over. He actually either stood up or fell off the commode and attempted to crawl for a distance.
Ginger dit s'être réveillée un peu plus tard, vers 2h de l'après-midi. Elle appelle Elvis depuis le lit, mais n'obtient pas de réponse.
I went to the door and I knocked on it. Elvis didn't answer. And that was when I opened the door and I found Elvis.
À 14h15, la compagne d'Elvis émerge d'un sommeil profond. La jeune femme de 20 ans se lève et ouvre la porte de la salle de bain.
I walked in and I looked at him for a second and I thought, oh, he's hit his head. But I immediately, when I turned Elvis's head over, I knew I'd never seen him look that way before. So I immediately went to a state of shock, and I thought for a few minutes, and the furthest thing from my mind was Elvis was dead. There was no way. Immediately, I picked up the phone, I called downstairs, and one of the maids answered.
When she said something bad has happened, and she was crying. So I pushed the telephone down, and I go upstairs, but not through the black doors. I walked down the hallway that looked through his dressing room area into his bathroom. And when I saw him with his face, beard kind of down in the carpet and half dressed, I come back downstairs. And by that time, another bodyguard was coming in the door. And I started screaming, hollering for this bodyguard to go upstairs and see what is happening.
People began running up and down the stairs. Vernon showed up and said, oh, my boy is dead. Even little Lisa Marie came in from a nearby bedroom and wanted to know what was wrong with her daddy.
Certains témoins avancent qu'on a tenté le bouche à bouche pour réanimer Elvis. Mais Sonny West, pourtant absent ce jour-là, dément formellement cette thèse.
The way that Elvis was, there was no way to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. His tongue was about half out of his mouth, and his teeth were clamped down on it, and it was almost bitten in two.
Members of the entourage were going in all directions. They were trying to reach Dr. Nicopolis. They called for an ambulance.
We were all just really working with him. Then the ambulance arrived.
I'm the one that let the paramedics in.
Dr. Nick showed up at the mansion about the time the ambulance is getting ready to leave, and he hops in the back. The medical, the personnel in the ambulance described the scene. They saw an assortment of drugs in the bathroom and said that they would come back for those.
L'ambulance part en trombe et arrive au Baptist Memorial Hospital peu avant 15 heures. Les ambulanciers transportent Elvis aux urgences.
When I got to the hospital, Elvis had already arrived. The Harvey team, which is the cardiac specialists for the hospital, were working on Elvis.
When I found out the Harvey team was on Elvis, I can tell you that my legs absolutely turned to water. And I started to the emergency room, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to walk over there.
There were doctors all over there in their hospital garb working on him. It was total chaos.
The emergency room quickly becomes a magnet for all kinds of people as rumors begin to spread that something's wrong with Elvis. The hospital puts out a cover story to try to hold off the phone calls and the press inquiries.
Les médecins espèrent un miracle tandis qu'ils tentent le tout pour le tout.
They were doing heart massage. They were shocking him. Every possible thing that could be done.
Quelqu'un pense toutefois qu'ils ont commis une erreur.
The stomach contents were removed during their attempts to resuscitate Elvis. And for reasons that were never entirely made clear, those contents were dumped. And that would have been a key piece of evidence in performing the autopsy.
Les minutes s'écoulent, inexorables. Les médecins s'acharnent en vain.
They did keep working for a few minutes, and I said to Dr. Nick, don't put him through this anymore. I asked them to stop because it was so evident that he had been gone a long time.
Marion did say that it was time to let Elvis rest and be with his mother.
Elvis Aaron Presley est déclaré mort à 15h30 le 16 août 1977. Il a 42 ans.
After Elvis was pronounced dead, Marion walked over and kissed him on his forehead.
When the Harvey team was over and everybody disbanded, I went back in the room and wiped his face with a cloth and brushed his hair out of his eyes and told him goodbye. And I got his pajamas and his Star of David for Vernon.
One of the nurses pulled the sheet up over Elvis. The doctor said, we'll take him up to the morgue.
Quelques instants plus tard, Dick Grob fait une découverte incroyable.
I noticed that one of the other bodies on the table, covered with a sheet, was moving. That didn't strike me as being what was normal, so I went over there, and lo and behold, there's a photographer there, a paparazzi there, covered up with a sheet.
Les ambulanciers retournent à Graceland. Eux non plus ne sont pas au bout de leur surprise.
When they got back, the drugs all disappeared. The bathroom had been sanitized.
I was told to wrap it all in newspaper and put it in a bag and put it out there in the waste.
Mais les preuves n'ont pas toutes disparu.
They overlooked a couple of my items. I mean, how foolish would it be to pour the pills out and leave the bottle, so to speak? They left this drug container, but no drugs in there. Dr. Nicopolis told me at that time that there were no narcotics or any type of controlled or scheduled drugs being used, that Mr. Presley was taking an antibiotic for a gastrointestinal problem.
Vers 16 heures, Sam Thompson est de retour à Graceland.
Dr. Nick was actually, at that moment, I walked in delivering the news to Vernon that Elvis had been pronounced dead. And there was wailing and crying, and it was just pandemonium.
Subsiste un problème de taille. Qui va annoncer à la fillette de 9 ans que son père est décédé?
We was waiting on her mother to come from California so that she could tell her what had happened. But she asked for Lena Thompson.
En fait, Lisa Mary soupçonne déjà le pire. C'est elle qui annonce la nouvelle à l'ex-compagne de son père.
She called me before she called anybody. I picked up the phone, I said, hello. Lisa said, Linda? I said, hey, little goobernickel. She said, it's Lisa. I said, I know who you are. And she was screaming, and she said, my daddy's dead, my daddy's dead. And I threw the phone in the air. And I just started to scream, no, no, no.
À l'hôpital, l'autopsie d'Elvis est en cours.
Right after Elvis's death, Vernon Presley ordered an autopsy. It became one of the most controversial autopsies in American history.
If Vernon signed it, requested it, and paid it, then the autopsy belonged to the family, so that the gruesome photographs and things that are part of an autopsy would not be made public.
The finding on that autopsy was that Elvis died of cardiac arrhythmia. That's nonsense. Elvis died of polypharmacy, multiple drug ingestion. He had 10 drugs, including synthetic heroin, in his system.
He had this allergic reaction. There were little hemorrhages from the waist up that they found on his body, which was a signal that, this is probably a drug reaction.
Elvis Presley died because he had taken drugs for a long period of time, and I believe inappropriately.
Les médecins légistes terminent leur examen. Le corps d'Elvis est ensuite transporté aux pompes funèbres de Memphis pour y être embaumé, puis on le ramène à Graceland.
They brought the body back from the funeral home. I cleared the house that night, and then I spent that night with the body because there were threats to steal the body.
Le mercredi 17 août 1977, la famille Presley annonce que les fans d'Elvis sont invités à venir lui rendre un dernier hommage à Graceland. De 15h à 18h30, plus de 20 000 personnes défilent devant son cercueil. 50 000 autres restent à la porte quand les grilles se referment. Au Baptist Memorial Hospital, le docteur Jerry Francisco tient une conférence de presse.
Dr. Francisco went out and told the press that Elvis was apparently the victim of a cardiac arrhythmia, or erratic heartbeat, which is really a kind of a meaningless thing to say. You get hit by a truck and you have an erratic heartbeat and you die. What killed you? Was it the truck or was it the cardiac arrhythmia?
La déclaration du docteur Francisco en surprend plus d'un.
Dr. Francisco said it in what I call medical leaves, but he said Elvis Presley died because his heart stopped beating. And that's not a legitimate final diagnosis because he had not eliminated the other things that might cause a heart to stop beating.
Coroners with national names have examined the autopsy results. They all agree it was cardiac arrhythmia.
Certains pensent qu'Elvis s'est suicidé, d'autres réfutent cette hypothèse.
Elvis Presley wasn't trying to kill himself. Those doctors had prescribed those drugs. He was exercising and getting ready for another tour. It's bogus. He wasn't trying to kill himself.
And he wasn't about to commit suicide. He was not that kind of person. Elvis believed in God too much, and he knew that that would be a sin.
In essence, he committed suicide, but truthfully, he didn't.
La controverse se poursuivra des années. La mort d'Elvis Presley fait les gros titres dans le monde entier.
Took me into a room with Vernon and the Colonel, and there were telegrams all over the bed from the Queen of England and the President of the United States and the Premier of this and the Prime Minister of that, and people from all over the world, all walks of life, every movie star, everybody.
Le jeudi 18 août, une messe a lieu à Graceland en présence de la famille et des proches d'Elvis. Puis les porteurs acheminent le cercueil jusqu'à une Cadillac blanche.
We picked the casket up. It was like a Caterpillar tractor. It was so heavy. I said, this son of a bitch tried to kill us when he was alive. He's still trying. And we walked out the door with it, and this big limb fell off the tree. It happened. It really did. It was a true story. I told you, I said, boys, he's the one who broke that limb.
80 000 personnes se rassemblent sur le boulevard Elvis Presley pour regarder passer les 16 limousines blanches du convoi funèbre. Tandis que les hélicoptères survolent la scène, les policiers de Memphis tiennent la foule à distance.
I never saw anything like it. It was unbelievable. They were lined in the streets, you know, 20 deep, kids, adults, little babies, signs. And it was bizarre. It was all like Twilight Zone.
Le 18 août 1977, à 16h24, Elvis Aaron Presley est enterré au cimetière de Forest Hills, à Memphis. Mais ce ne sera pas là sa dernière demeure. 6 semaines plus tard, la police déjoue une tentative de vol du corps du King. Pour des raisons de sécurité, sa dépouille est transférée à Graceland. Dès lors, les plus folles rumeurs vont circuler. Les funérailles d'Elvis déclenchent une véritable ruée vers l'or. Chacun veut tirer profit de l'héritage du King. Sa fortune est pourtant évaluée à moins de 3 millions de dollars en 1997.
People forget that Elvis's career was in decline when he died. The estate almost sold Graceland for something under $1 million because it was doing so poorly.
Vernon est l'exécuteur testamentaire et Lisa Mary l'unique héritière des biens d'Elvis. Mais la fillette de 9 ans est bien trop jeune pour toucher son héritage.
When Vernon was getting close to death, he made Priscilla the executor, and I think it was one of the best and one of the few good business decisions Vernon ever made, because Priscilla then hired professional people to manage the estate.
L'ex-épouse d'Elvis est une femme d'affaires. À la mort de Vernon en 1979, Priscilla transforme l'héritage du King en un merchandising lucratif. La Memphis Mafia n'est pas surprise.
When your husband dies, you've been divorced for 6, 7 years, how can you be his widow? I don't think the term calculating fits her. I think demon does.
Divorcée depuis 1973, Priscilla Presley contrôle parfaitement l'exploitation de l'image du King, mais pas la Memphis Mafia.
The estate doesn't like us in particular because we can tell the true story because it is our story. They can do nothing about it. And, you know, it's that controlling factor.
Car Priscilla préférait qu'on oublie certains aspects peu reluisants de la vie d'Elvis, sa consommation abusive de médicaments par exemple. Mais la brigade des stupéfiants mène justement une enquête.
There was a tremendous amount of controlled substance prescriptions that were prescribed for Elvis. A tremendous amount. Certainly an amount that I was unaccustomed to seeing one person get in a year.
If you added up all the prescriptions that had been written by Dr. Nick to Elvis in the last year or two of his life, they averaged more than 100 a day. It's just staggering.
Les autorités de l'État du Tennessee rayent le docteur George Nikopoulos de l'Ordre des médecins en 1980 pour abus de prescription. Il n'est pourtant pas le seul coupable.
There was a conspiracy of sorts to cover up what people thought was the cause of his death. Those around him knew that there were drugs being used in inappropriate quantities.
The problem wasn't in Elvis getting prescriptions. The problem was people telling him no.
They were all trying to point a finger at somebody, point to blame. You know, blame somebody, except the one person he should have blamed, and that was Elvis.
On enquête sur les causes de son décès et parallèlement on exploite son image. Le merchandising autour du King génère des millions. Des douzaines de livres viennent alimenter son mythe écrit par des proches et des beaucoup moins proches.
If I ever wrote a book, it's going to be called I Saw His Back.
Et puis il y a Billy Miller, un entrepreneur de Las Vegas qui prétend avoir travaillé pour Elvis comme détective privé de 1970 à 1977.
My dad and Elvis's dad, Vernon, became very close friends. When Elvis did the International here in 1969, I got invited to come out here to the show, my dad and I. When it was over with, Elvis said, "Why don't you do some work for me?" What Elvis had me to do for him was just like personal investigations.
Miller dit posséder des lettres d'Elvis et des souvenirs rares.
Elvis in elementary school made this, and he'd given it to his mother as a gift. And after Gladys died in 1958, Vernon had it.
À en croire Miller, son livre à paraître contient des révélations explosives.
I was the one that bugged the cars and bugged Graceland. I saw more than I should know about. A lot of stuff I'm taking to the grave with me.
Les meilleurs amis d'Elvis croient plutôt à un canular.
Never in a time since 1967 that I knew Elvis did I know of a Billy Miller. There was never any bugs or security devices placed inside of Graceland.
Instead of talking about the house being bugged, can I tell you something? The only bugs in that house were roaches.
Billy Miller is not and has not been ever a private detective for Elvis.
Billy Miller had nothing to do whatsoever with Elvis. He's bogus as a $3 bill.
I think what upsets them is here we are 20-some years later and they find out I'm a private investigator.
Un vieil ami de la famille Presley croit pourtant l'histoire de Miller.
Billy Miller and Elvis put a number of hidden cameras in different places in Graceland. And he also bugged a lot of the automobiles. There are so many people that does not want a lot of this information released. And in my opinion, what they are trying to do is put doubts on Billy Miller to make a lot of people think Billy Miller is not real, but Billy Miller is real.
Pendant ce temps, l'image d'Elvis se vend bien et ce n'est pas près de s'arrêter. Sous forme de gadgets, sur les timbres, au restaurant ou dans les bacs, Elvis est bien vivant. Sa fortune a considérablement grossi. En 1999, elle s'élevait environ à 400 millions de dollars. L'argent n'a pas fait le bonheur d'Elvis durant les derniers jours de sa vie. Il était déprimé et solitaire, sa musique et sa santé déclinaient. Mais son héritage traversera les siècles.
Greatness withstands the test of time. You know, his contribution to our society, his revolutionary contributions, you know, certainly paved the way for artists today.
Avec des chansons comme Hound Dogs et Blue Suede Shoes, Elvis a révolutionné la musique populaire. Il a été le révélateur du rock and roll et l'un des plus grands vendeurs de l'histoire du disque à travers le monde.
Bill Buckley said it, that Elvis is going to turn out to be the greatest cultural icon of the 20th century, and he is. I mean, there's Elvis and there's everybody else.
Thank you very much.